Good morning. My name is Maggie McTigg, and today we will be diving deeper into chlorofluorocarbons' impact on phytoplankton. We will be addressing to what extent do the effects of chlorofluorocarbons on the ozone layer contribute to UV radiation damage to phytoplankton in Antarctic waters in the last 50 years. My take on this is that chlorofluorocarbons are negatively impacting phytoplankton in Antarctica, and let's discover why. First, we must address what exactly is the ozone layer. The ozone layer is a protective atmospheric shield that lies in the stratosphere, blocking the Earth from the UV light radiation. As you can see, the ozone layer is right here, and we live in the troposphere. So without this layer, we would be penetrated by all the UV light radiation. Now, the ozone layer is currently being damaged by man-made chemicals, such as chlorofluorocarbons. Chlorofluorocarbons are found in aerosols, refrigerants, propellants, and manufactured goods. These chlorofluorocarbons react with UV light radiation in the atmosphere, which actually releases chlorine. Just one chlorine molecule can destroy over 100,000 ozone molecules, which is a huge number. So as you can see here, the chlorofluorocarbons are released up into the stratosphere and interact with the UV radiation, which then releases the chlorine and breaks down the ozone molecules. So one objection to this is that chlorofluorocarbons are actually heavier than air, so people wonder, how is it possible that they would actually enter up into the stratosphere? This is because through temperature and pressure gradients, they are propelled up into the atmosphere just like a hot air balloon would be. So, chlorofluorocarbons were actually banned in 1987 by the Montreal Protocol. However, they are still being illegally manufactured in countries such as China and Eastern Asia. So as you can see, after the Montreal Protocol was in place, the chlorofluorocarbons were actually declined, but then they began to steadily rise afterwards because they're illegally being used, and it's very hard to pinpoint an exact source as to where they are coming from. So they just know the general region, but there's not too much that can be done about it without more research. So as you can see, this is Antarctica right here, and the blue and purple color represents a low concentration of ozone in that area. Now all around it, you can see how there's higher concentrations of ozone. Green is kind of like the middleman, and then we have higher concentrations in the red and yellow areas. So we can understand there will be a higher penetration of UV light radiation on the area of Antarctica, which would harm the phytoplankton. So phytoplankton are primary producers of the aquatic ecosystems in Antarctica. So they remove CO2 from the atmosphere, and most of these phytoplankton float right along the surface. So as you can see from this image, they're the basis of the food chain, as zooplankton consume marine phytoplankton, which are also consumed by fish and sharks. So without these, the rest of the ecosystem would crumble. You can also see how they release oxygen into the atmosphere through photosynthesis. Now, unfortunately, due to chlorofluorocarbons, there has been a 40% drop in phytoplankton since the 1950s, according to Scientific American magazine. So UV radiation traps titanium dioxide nanoparticles in the water, which kills phytoplankton. Oxidative stress is caused by photoactive dioxide nanoparticles, which is caused by toxicity. So they did many experiments to demonstrate this toxicity, and each one of these experiments contained UV light radiation. So it's the chemical reaction between the two that would cause phytoplankton to become killed. So as you can see here, the UV radiation would enter through the loss of the ozone layer into the cell and cause a loss of pigments, reduce metabolism, DNA damage, filament fragmentation, and would eventually harm their growth and survival rates. So it's going to be harming the cells and also reacting with those dioxide nanoparticles to kill the phytoplankton. So a counter to this is that the decline in phytoplankton populations in Antarctica is actually due to receding sea ice. So a loss of sea ice would actually mean more UV radiation exposure, as there's not that top layer to shield from the UV radiation. So that would cause further penetration. And then sea ice receding actually leaves a layer of nutrients on the surface for phytoplankton, according to the National Snow and Ice Association. So it would actually benefit them in a sense. All right, so to break it all down for you, because it's kind of hard to understand, chlorofluorocarbon molecules are released from refrigerants and aerosols. They would react with UV light radiation in the atmosphere. They break down the ozone layer above Antarctica. The stronger radiation traps the dioxide nanoparticles in the water, killing the phytoplankton, and therefore the phytoplankton populations suffer as a result of this. So the solution is to restrict the usage of illegal chlorofluorocarbons productions in manufactured goods. So we should urge our governments to find the source of these illegal manufactured goods and make sure that we don't support a company that does use them in their process. Thank you. What are your questions?
All right, 2 questions for you. First up, what information did you need before you began your research?
Before I began my research, I first had to identify my research question and identify a problem in the world. So I basically just began thinking about the phytoplankton and how they might be affected by pollution in our atmosphere.
Okay, and explain the level of certainty you are about that solution.
I'm 100% certain. As you can see, when chlorofluorocarbons react with UV light radiation in the atmosphere, since they release chlorine, and just one of those chlorine molecules can destroy 100,000 ozone molecules, you can see that that damage is insane, and it really just goes to show how that is the true cause of the destruction to phytoplankton.
You are done.